Well, it seemed fitting for us to start our Martin Luther King Day celebration with President Obama's speech at the King Memorial. With the end of this week comes the end of a presidency. Some say it was the most accomplished presidency in history. According to PleaseCutTheCrap.com, Obama's accomplishments far outweigh the rhetoric trying to tear him down. And his speech on that day on the National Mall was one of the best. He said, "In this place, he will stand for all time among monuments to those who fathered this nation and those who defended it." A black preacher with no official rank or title who somehow gave voice to our deepest dreams and our most lasting ideals. A man who stirred our conscience and thereby helped make our union more perfect. President Obama pointed to King, a man, a human being like you and me, flawed and conflicted, common in most ways, perhaps a person even surprised by his own success, who changed our country. The president said, "We forget now, but during Dr. King's life, he wasn't always considered a unifying figure. Even after rising to prominence, even after winning the Nobel Peace Prize, Dr. King was vilified by many, denounced as a rabble-rouser and an agitator, a communist and a radical. He was even attacked by his own people, by those who felt he was going too fast, or those who felt he was going too slow." One great moment, often overlooked in the world of speeches about King, was the moment after King was shot, when Bobby Kennedy stood up and said in Indianapolis, "We have to make an effort in the United States. We have to make an effort to understand, to get beyond, to go beyond these rather difficult times." And he quoted a poem saying, "Even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart until in our own despair, against our will comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." Bobby Kennedy said in 1968, "What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or whether they be black." More appropriate words for this week and next have rarely been spoken from the echoes of history. These came 49 years ago in a context surrounding a man of moral courage who we honor today. That man, like the man he emulated from the ancient texts of the Bible, died for his convictions. The question today is whether King's dream has died with him. In Jesus' case, a religion was created about him and fails so often to live up to his dreams, which by wild extrapolation was about living lives of love and courage and always, always, always sacrificing something of our egos, our power, our resources for those who need us, those who have not, those who are trampled by society. King was a shining light because he took the religion of Jesus, not about Jesus, and pointed to it, saying, "No man, woman, or child lives outside the circle, outside the grace of God, no matter how wonderful or horrible that grace might be at any time." King pointed to a humanity in the black man and woman and child that the white man and woman and child often failed to see in his time. And he called on our country to live up to its ideals. King's ideals articulated in that dream speech we all know from school. That speech that was forged in the ideals of our Constitution and in a faith in a God who loves us and loves all creation and is evidenced in the dreams of our unity beyond differences. Those ideals were forged in deeper places than a speech, but were projected on that day by King. A vision where children, white and black, unified, hand in hand, see no difference and work together for hope, for justice. Did King anticipate what we are living through today? The rise of the, quote, alt-right, led by a white child growing up just north of this church who would be a rally point for a new white supremacist movement, only this time without hoods? Did he anticipate Ferguson and all the shootings and the torture we have seen in communities across our country these past 2 years? Did he anticipate a moment in which our country seems more divided than it has been in so many years? I think probably. I think King probably anticipated that we might be here, that we might be reliving some of these conversations about race and class and difference. The beauty of King's promise is that despite knowing that this all might be repeated in history, he still articulated a dream. So the question today is whether King's dream, the end of racism, the end of division, is dead, or is it just dormant? In some ways, I think all dreams die with their beholders, because in their absence comes interpretation, often unintended interpretations. In some ways, we as a country have never really fully realized the dream. We have work and healing to do. This week I was asked to write a statement for Thanksgiving Square's Multi-Faith Council for a nationwide effort to hold a day of racial healing, which is this Tuesday. I want to share with you what I wrote. These are my words. I wrote, "Faced with the real divides across race and ethnicity, we acknowledge that work we must all do is to heal the heart of democracy through efforts to confront hatred and the demonization of each other. Faced with disparities apparent in rhetoric that stands to split and defeat the hearts and minds of us all, we see that there is work to do to ground our faiths in love again. Faced with the loss of our ability to see each other as one kin and one human family, we see that the work of racial healing is a key ingredient in building up the kinds of communities we hope for. Our faith traditions demand of us that we proclaim a day on which we begin again our efforts toward racial healing. We pledge to include efforts to dismantle racism and white supremacy in all forms. We pledge to work across borders within ourselves, our families, our congregations, and our communities to unearth areas of growth and potential that promote a new way of caring for every human being as a life created in the divine image. We vow to create spaces which include, not exclude, people of all races and ethnicities and cultural backgrounds in a dialogue about the realities and challenges we all face. In doing these things, we seek to highlight the history of the racial divide in America, to atone for what has happened in the past, to acknowledge our personal and communal racism, whether it be conscious or unconscious, and we pledge to do our part to create a new and better reality for ourselves and our children, a world in which all people walk together in a covenant of love and justice, a world in which wholeness and peace might prevail. I have no delusion that we will live up to this vision or this dream anytime soon. What is ahead of us, just in our state, looks less and less like covenants of love and justice. There are 6 or 7 anti-LGBT bills on the House floor. There are 6 or 7 anti-women bills on the floor of our state house. The rhetoric in our state alone puts the most vulnerable in more vulnerable positions while ignoring the real issues. In our state, we have 16% of our population living in poverty. In the second largest state economy in the country. Forbes magazine ranked Texas 32nd in quality of life, all things considered, largely because of this divide. We have a lieutenant governor who posts on Twitter pictures of segregated bathrooms from the civil rights era with statements that say, "always segregated," pointing to trans people this time. Can we live up to new dreams? Dreams of love and justice? Will we have the moral courage to even articulate them in this confused climate where fake news informs us and real news is suspect? I had someone tell me recently that the Washington Post wasn't a reliable media source when they were reporting on charitable giving by presidential candidates. The Washington Post? Will we have the moral courage to stand up, to show up, to speak our truths? You see, living lives of courage, which we explore today and next week and the following week in a series, asks us some real questions about who we are. It asks us not just to think about these things, but to act in the world. And we will march, some of us in Austin this Saturday, and some on April 5th for Lobby Day, for women at the State House, and more, I am sure. Because lives of courage means not backing down from speaking the truth, even when it feels vulnerable. Living lives of courage means knowing that feeling fear requires action, not retreat. Living lives of courage means following heart and passion to stand up, not sit down when the vulnerable are in danger, especially when we feel tired or we feel like we must close the door on the world's problems to preserve our own energy. Living lives of courage means facing suffering, not turning away from it for our own comfort. And we have models for this. David and Goliath, Gandhi and King and Parks and Tubman, and so many people, as President Obama said, so many unnamed people who showed up, sat in, marched in marches, stood up for what was right, because they found courage. They knew that deep inside them they were required to do something. So many. But today is for King. It is for his courage to stand before the nation and preach a message of hope, a dream of justice and compassion. It is also for all of us who know that courage resides deep within each of our hearts. courage to say both that we have come a long way since those days of King, and we still have a long way to go. So it seems to me that it is fitting also to end with President Obama's words. A more eloquent president we have rarely ever seen, and perhaps rarely ever will see. One whose connection to heart and to mind was apparent. He said in those words of the dedication for King, "See here an America that is more fair and more free and more just than the one Dr. King addressed that day." We are right to savor that slow but certain progress. Progress that is expressed itself in a million ways, large and small, across this nation every single day as people of color, of all colors and creeds, live together and work together and fight alongside one another and learn together and build together and love one another. So it is right for us to celebrate Dr. King's dream and his vision of unity. We can't be discouraged by what is, the president said. We've got to keep pushing for what ought to be, the America we ought to leave to our children. Mindful that the hardships we face are nothing compared to those Dr. King and his fellow marchers faced 50 years ago. And that if we maintain our faith in ourselves and in the possibilities of this nation, there is no challenge we cannot surmount. Friends, a good and meaningful Martin Luther King weekend to you. May these words ring true for us today and this week and in all coming weeks. Amen.